back with session 1D, the last of this 2-day primer for this session, and then we'll pick this up in about 2 months or so. But what we're going to focus now is on just a little bit of basic file organization, a little bit of basic visibility settings, view templates. We're going to go into a little bit more depth like we touched on earlier. Going to talk about setting up sheets, mostly just for the purpose of printing. Trying to print and keep things consistent in Revit without using sheets is a pain. So I don't like to do that, and I don't want you guys to do that either. And then finally, setting up the file for BIM 360 and uploading and kind of discussing what the features of BIM 360 are. So we've got our model, and you guys will eventually have one that's much more complete than this. But this is in good shape, and we'll start talking now about file organization. So the first thing is we have our working views here versus our floor plans. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start to categorize these with a little bit more detail in order to make sure that they categorize properly and they're not just kind of floating out in space. So in order to get the views organized, you have to create a parameter to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create what's called a project parameter. A project parameter is different from other types of parameters because what it will do is it will, if I create any new views in the project, they will automatically have this parameter associated with them. I could create a furniture parameter that can the same thing. If I had a furniture project parameter, any piece of furniture I put into the project would have that associated with it. And again, we will go into this in more detail at a later date. But basically, just for now, we're going to add a project parameter. Don't get intimidated by this. Like I said, we'll talk about this in detail. But I'm going to call it view classification. For the discipline, we can stick with common. The type of parameter, I need to make sure I pick text, and the group parameter under, I'm going to select identity data, keep it as an instance, and then also finally make sure you check views here, which means it'll associate with views. You can put this onto different things, but for what we want to do right now, this is fine. It's important to kind of get this right the first time because you can't really edit this once you set this. You can delete it and remove it, but you can't really edit it. So I click OK. Like if I can remove this, but if I try to modify it, like I can't change the type of parameter. I can change the name and where it goes, but I can't change the type. That's why it's kind of important to get text on the first one. And now, because I've grouped it under identity data, you may have seen this just popped up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to call these working. Right? All my working plans, or this doesn't have the view template associated with it. Let's call this working plan. View classification is grayed out, but that's okay because I can come into here, edit this, and for view classification, I can edit it globally and call it working and click OK. And then all of these, which are my arc plans, this one is also not assigned properly, but now it is. I can do the same thing, come in here. For view classification, I'm going to call it presentation. Click OK. It's not doing any sorting right now because what I need to do is click on Views All, go to Browser Organization, and I can create a new browser organization type. And I can call this custom, right? And then I'm going to have it do filter by, let me just actually see what this one, because this is all, I'm going to check custom, and I'm going to go to edit, and I want to go filter by view classification. Sorry. turn this filter off. I'm going to go to grouping and sorting, and I want to group by view classification and click OK. Then I click OK. So now it's actually, it got a little bit messed up. I got to change this, but it is doing by presentation and working now. So the next thing is I want to then filter by type, which I believe will give me by 3D view and so on. So these are not classified, so they have question marks, but that's good because it lets me know that they don't have classifications associated with them. So now I know, okay, here's all my presentation plans, all my floor plans, here's all my working floor plans, and I can come into these elevations, select them all, and classify them as working. And now they will sort in there. So this is how you start to manage all the different views that you're going to end up creating throughout the course of the project. Just a little bit of file organization. You can do this with sheets and so on, but it's a great way to just keep things organized. I've found that if you don't do things like this, you can end up with a whole bunch of different views all over the place that becomes almost impossible to find and track. All right, so then getting on to basic visibility, I'm just going to make a couple edits here in order to show you what's possible. I'm in floor plan level 1. First, I don't want to see these in here. I think this was part of the view template earlier, but I'm going to come into the arc plan and I'm going to go into overrides for the model. I'm going to go down to site and I'm going to turn off internal origin, base point, and survey point. Click OK, click OK, and so now I don't see those, right? Starting to get this a little bit more organized. Let's say I don't think that my walls are registering thick enough. I can actually go into my visibility graphics, or let's say actually let's get them to register with like a hatch in them or something like that. I'm going to go into my visibility graphics, and I can't edit this because it's got a template on it. So what I have to do is click on here to get into the template, and I'm going to go into the model overrides. I'm going to go into walls, and see where it says cut patterns? I'm going to override that. I want to make it like a diagonal crosshatch. And then color, let's make it like a dark gray. Click OK. Then click OK and OK and OK again. And now I've got this subtle hatch in all of my walls. You may or may not want that, but you know, this is how you start to edit those things. It's a little bit light, so let me go back into here. I'll go back into the view template, model overrides, walls, change this to black. All right, cool. So now you've got your diagonal down crosshatch for all of this. All right, cool. So that's how we edit view templates. That's how we edit basic visibility. You can change things like the pattern on the surfaces of elements and things like that. There's a million different ways of editing. If we wanted to, we probably don't want to, but we could edit the furniture to all register as red lines if we wanted to. There's lots of customization you can do. I'll undo that. That's just, it usually takes hours and hours to get this stuff right, but that's how you would start to do that. Maybe one thing I'll show you quick is if we wanted to edit the thickness of the cut in this view, let's say we wanted that to register a little bit thicker, or we might actually even want it to register as like a solid gray fill. So let's change both those things. I'll come into my cut patterns and I'm going to make this solid. And I'll make it actually that dark gray again. But maybe I actually want to make the cut line a little bit thicker. So I'm going to change the weight, and I'm going to go, by default, the default is set elsewhere. So let's just try a 7 for now and see what that does. 7 is probably a little too thick, but you see that gray fill now. Back into here. Let's make it a 6. All right, cool. So now we're starting to get our floor plans that maybe are reading a little bit more legible. I actually don't really like this, but just for the purposes of today, we'll look at that. Now the nice thing is because I've changed it in my view template, it's changed everywhere where I'm using that. A few other quick things you can do, which I'll turn this on and off, but you can actually turn the shadows on. And again, this has to be done in the view template, but I can come in here. I'm going to save this quick just in case. Come in here, turn shadows, cast shadows, hit apply. Okay, hit apply. Did it work? No. What did I miss? Shadows. It might be actually lighting. Yeah, I've got to turn sunlight from top right. Let's try that. It's happening here. For some reason, the roof plan, it's not cooperating. I think it might have to do with the level by which the shadows project onto. Sometimes it's easier to just come in here, enable temporary view properties, then I can come edit the shadows right in here. Or sun path, sun settings. Oh, place ground plane at ground. Let me try that. The last thing I'm going to try here is see if there's an issue with the view range. Let's set this to unlimited. There we go. So that was the problem. It was the view range was not showing all the way down. But why is this? The shadows are acting a little bit funny on the upper floor here. I don't know why. Oh, because I don't have the roofs modeled out, or they're not being shown. Anyway, in the sake of just trying to keep things moving, I can turn shadows on in 3D views. We can set up 3D views like this. Again, I think there's a lot more you can do to this to get this to look pretty, and you can mess around with some of the view styles, but let's just say I like the way this looks right now. I can actually lock this and save orientation and lock view, and I'm going to call this isometric or axon metric. And this means I can now put this on a sheet and it'll stay consistent. If I don't do that, then if somebody comes and rotates the view, then the sheet will get a little bit messed up. So sheets. I'm not going to talk about title blocks today, but I'm just going to talk about creating basic sheets. I can right click on sheets and go to new sheet, or I can go to view, sheet, right? We don't have any sort of title block right now, but I'm going to create a new title block. The thing that's a little bit frustrating about sheets is you have to have like a title block, which is the base for it. So I'm just going to go into File, and I'm going to go into New Family, English Imperial, Title Blocks, and I'm going to do D. Let's start with Arc D. You can do 24 by 18, but let's start with Arc D. This is actually just a blank thing. This is exactly how I want it. I want to just have a blank sheet that I can place views on so I can get the scale of them right and so on. So let's call this blank title block. And I'm going to load this into the project and close it. It's okay, I can't create it here, but if I go now into my sheet, I should have blank title block. I can click OK. And now I can start to drag views onto this. So if I have that 3D axonometric, I can click and drag that. I can place it right on the sheet. And this will be to the right scale. Whatever the scale I have it set to in the view, it will come. If I don't want to see that little viewport thing, I can turn off view title, make it say none. So now I don't have that. Again, if I'm just trying to print it to scale, and I can actually just turn off this little extension line. Show title, no. Just turn this off because I don't want to actually see anything. It just allows me to print things consistently. Because if I print this, I can get my settings. I have Adobe PDF as my printer. I can start to say size, Arc D, center it, zoom 100%, vector processing, all this stuff is good. Hide unreferenced view tags is good to have on because if you have a section or something that doesn't refer to another view quite yet, which again we'll get into that down the road, this is a good way to make sure that those don't show up. So I've got my vector processing landscape. I can actually save this and call this arc d blank. And I'll have that. I click OK. Current window. Click OK. It's going to ask me where I want to save it, so I'll just call it Barcelona Working PDF for now. Sometimes it gets a little stuck like that. I've found that if you just do it again, it'll go. Hopefully. Yeah, there we go. Great. So now it'll always be in the same place on the sheet. The ArcD, everything is accurate. If I try to just print from this view, it's a little bit harder to manage the scale, the placement, and all of that. And especially if I start to add geometry, it won't be centered anymore. So really just try to create sheets when you print. You can rename it and call it whatever you want. You can title it. You can call this sketch. Sketch 1. axon. Now I can do a new sheet. I'm going to do it the blank title block as well. Now I can start placing like my floor plans on there. So here's my presentation floor plan. I can place that on there. Get that in the right spot. And start creating sketch 2. Rename this floor plan. And so on. Elevations, etc. Okay. So now this is in pretty good shape. The last thing we're going to do is do BIM 360 uploading. All right, so I am going to go to Construction Cloud. Actually, I think it's different. Okay, do my little security code here. Okay, I'm just going to create a new project, which you guys will have access to all of this. And this is what you'll do. You'll create a new project, call it your name. I'm just going to put it on my work account for now. Project type, it doesn't really matter, but you can just do like a demonstration project, sample project. You don't have to worry about this stuff. You can put it in if you want to. But once that's all set, you do create project. And you want to start adding the members of your team. So start putting in the email addresses of your team, making sure everybody has access. And once they're all online, up and running, I now have my project, my GSEP Revit Primer project. So I can come in here and go into, I think it's Insight. So I have design here, or no, I need to go to, I don't think, one thing that's important to do is make sure that these things are enabled. So like docs has to be enabled. Design collaboration and model coordination you don't have to worry too much about. But now I have my project docs enabled. So if I go back here, I should be able to go to docs, and I have my file structure for the GSAP Revit Primer. I just have project files. I want to create like a new thing. Click here. Add a subfolder. We'll call this Revit Models. So you can start uploading your project Revit models there. Now that's good. And I don't actually upload it through here. I come back into here, and I'm going to push this up and make this into a Revit Cloud model. So I'm going to go into Collaborate. I'm going to go into Collaborate here, and I'm going to do in the cloud. So it's going to say, okay, save it as a cloud model. I got to come here, change this to the GSAP Revit Primer, go into Project Files, Revit Model. I can rename it now if I want, so let's just call it Barcelona Pavilion. Click Save. It's going to think for a second. And I should have clarified this at the beginning, but what this means is that now everybody has access to this model at the same time. Everybody in your group, whether it's in Rethinking BIM or AT4 can access this model at the same time. So instead of saving, what you're going to want to do now is synchronize. When I click on that, I get this, and I'm going to click OK. And what it does is it actually saves all the changes to you. It loads the latest updates that are on the cloud model, and then it saves it again on your local. Because the way that this works is every time you change something in Revit, it doesn't actually change in your partner's model wherever they're working. You take ownership of that element. And that person cannot edit that element until you sync. And they also won't see those changes until you sync and they sync. So that's why it's important to make sure you're doing that rather than just saving. So every time you're done, don't save it. Go to sync and modify settings. Now if you change something, like if we move this bench, or maybe I can't move that because it's pinned. If I move this wall and I come here, I actually have this borrowed elements checked. I need to make sure that I keep that checked. You always want to make sure everything that's checkable here is checked when you sync. So now I'm going to relinquish ownership of that element. So if somebody else wants to edit it, they can. If I don't do that, then that element's going to be stuck with me. Okay? And so the last thing I'll say is that once you're in BIM 360 like this, you want to make sure you're archiving these models properly. And so if you click on Manage Cloud Models and you go into your model here, anybody in your group should be able to do this. It was last updated by me, but it's not the latest. So all I have to do is click on Publish Latest here. It's really good practice to do this maybe once a week, maybe I'd say actually twice a week, especially if you guys are working in this a lot. I'll show you what this does in a second, but this basically creates a version control of this. It's uploading now. I don't have to do anything. But if I come into my files here, I actually see that I now have a version 3 of this. For some reason, when you first create it, it creates a version 1 and a version 2. I don't know why, but I've just created a version 3 as well. And I can go back and I can always download these. And I can actually also click on this once it's done processing, and I can compare it against other versions of the model. So I just actually went back and came back in because it was taking a long time. It's done processing now, but you can see I actually can view the model in BIM 360. I can like cut sections and things like that through it. I can measure. It's pretty robust. I can like do this little first person perspective thing where I can then walk around in the building. And then one thing that's pretty cool is I can, let me see, I can see the properties of the project, so I can click on an element. Let me turn off this clipping plane. I can click on an element and I can see it. I can see the parameters of it that are associated with it. I've got like all of this information about it, even like the volume and the thickness and the area. All of that gets embedded into here. I can see sheets. I don't think I can see unless I purposely choose to upload those, but you can also like turn off ceilings or roofs. I don't know why it sort of turned off all that stuff. And the last thing, which I'd love to show you, let me see if I can remember how to do this. You can do compare, which is really cool. You can compare version 1 to version 3. version 2 to version 3, and it'll show you what's changed. So remember I moved that wall? It actually shows that this is modified. This was modified between those two versions. It'll show you anything that was added, removed, or deleted. And so it's actually a really cool way to understand what has changed from version to version, especially if you're getting a model that's been updated by a consultant or something like that. Okay, so that's it. I hope this was helpful, and we'll be continuing to learn more about this stuff in the next session.